name's David Turner. We're going to be talking about digital entrepreneurship and the Internet of Things. Brief background on me, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I spent many years in Silicon Valley, came down to San Diego, started a company, sold the company, and now I teach the year one of the Lavin program for entrepreneurship at San Diego State University. I have three distinguished colleagues here today with me. I'll go through a brief background on each of them, and then we'll have a panel type discussion. The first colleague is David Ron. David is an award-winning lecturer teaching in the College of Business at Chico State. He founded the E-Incubator at Chico State and is the faculty advisor for the Collegiate Entrepreneurship Organization Student Club. David has created the digital entrepreneurship course for the entrepreneurship program, and he currently runs two online businesses that provide courses on digital entrepreneurship, Essentials of Digital Entrepreneurship, and Digital Entrepreneurship for Entrepreneurs and Engineers.
Thank you for joining us. My name is
blends lean startup
Professor of
and agile development methodologies across entrepreneurs and engineering students.
Executive Director of our Lavin Entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Tammy. Next is Kaveh Abhari. Kaveh Abhari is an assistant professor of information systems at the Fowler College of Business at San Diego State University and an affiliate research faculty at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. His research focuses on the applications of social technologies in democratizing innovation, entrepreneurship, and education. He has founded D-Lab to research digital transformation and STEMD Squared Group to support STEM education in underserved communities. He holds a PhD in Communication and Information Sciences, a PhD in Management, and a Master's in Electrical Engineering. Shahab Tayeb is currently an assistant professor of electrical and at California State University, Fresno. He obtained his PhD in electrical engineering from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Shahab's research expertise and interests include embedded networking and cybersecurity, particularly in the context of the Internet of Things and cyber physical systems. He specializes in investigating attack mitigation techniques to safeguard connected devices and networks. His current research projects include applying data science techniques, particularly deep learning architectures, to tackle the detection of zero-day attacks. He has also been leading multiple research projects on workforce development and professional development STEM workforce. He has co-authored 40-plus refereed research papers, and his research findings have been highlighted by the National Science Foundation. He has also been the recipient of several scholarships and awards, including a U.S. Congressional Commendation for STEM mentorship. Shahab also held the esteemed position as the head of the rowing team at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So with that, I think we'll start off with some basic questions. And what I like about this group today is everybody is quite different in their approach to digital entrepreneurship and how it works within a university. And so I think we'll find this to be a really nice, exciting conversation with some very slight differences that symbiotically will come together and wrap this conversation into what I think is going to be a great hour of time spent. And so Dave, why don't I start with you, because you've started these programs and you've run these programs, you've invented these programs. For you, what is digital entrepreneurship, and what are some of the motivating factors from your perspective?
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that I find that's really interesting is that students are looking for a way to make their business real. And so the missing link, oftentimes they've got a business plan, they can produce products and things like that. The missing link is setting up a digital presence. So setting up a web presence online, as simple as that. Once they get that going, they've got 365 by 24/7 ongoing coverage, right? So it's open to the world. I think that there's this huge movement in America today where people are very interested in becoming digital entrepreneurs. They're content entrepreneurs. They've done something that they know a lot of and they're expert at it and they want to share that with other people. So they create courses online, or they show baking, or they write books or whatever. There's all kinds of different things. right now, today, with this global pandemic that we have, what we see with unemployment going up is that business filings go up as well, significantly. So right now is a great time in the world to be learning about digital entrepreneurship, because it's the way that you put your business on the map. Otherwise, people, how do they know about you? Most consumers these days are looking online for information. Everybody goes online before they look for products. So you've got to be out there. That's the motivation.
Kaveh, how about you? What is digital entrepreneurship to you, and what do you think some of the motivating factors are?
Thank you, David, and hello, everyone. I define digital entrepreneurship as creating value using digital tools. And it comes in two forms: digital technology as a core offering. For example, you're offering a new virtual reality headset, right? That's a core offering. And or as a supporting or enabler in a business context. For example, in telemedicine, right? Technology, digital technology, just an enabler for telemedicine. And based on the motivation beyond the importance of teaching digital entrepreneurship, of course, we live in a connected world because of globalization, because of the accessibility. All these things encourage teaching and supporting digital entrepreneurship. But very simple example of that, as just David Ron mentioned, during this pandemic, just look at the businesses that survive. Majority of them, they had two characteristics. They adapt with the new situation, and at the same time they're very agile in this with their adaptability. And both adaptability and agility enabled and supported by digital tools and digital technologies. Without them, there was no chance for these businesses to survive, and they are not tech industry. Look at the in grocery store that have an online e-commerce platform, or look at the healthcare provider that can provide video visits. All these businesses, they are surviving just because of the access to digital technology.
Thank you. And Shahab, I know that you take a different approach to this, and we had planned for you to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things. And at the beginning of this, we originally set the agenda to be 3 different presentations, but with this format, I think it's going to work better for the attendees. And maybe you can come in and talk a little bit about the Internet of Things and what digital entrepreneurship is there, and what some of the motivations around that is or are.
Sure. First of all, hello everyone. Thanks for having me. So basically, if I were to summarize the Internet of Things, it would be embedding sensors that generate data into the physical real-world objects for the purpose of either automating something or controlling an action. Now, with this said, my approach to teaching entrepreneurship has been basically I've been trying to test the hypothesis, which is everyone can be trained to become an entrepreneur, as some of the founders and godfathers of this field have always been emphasizing on. So, and I've taken that approach by trying to teach in a single course entrepreneurship to engineering students who have never had any background in any one of the aspects related to business or finance, for that matter, but know how to solve problems. Now, so basically, this hypothesis is still not proven. We are still working on training them. I've been working with a group of students and I will share some of the experiences with you. But there are some aspects of entrepreneurship that come natural to engineering students. And there are some aspects that are so far from their existing background that it's going to take months, if not years, to train them to change the way they think about, for example, problem solving. Now, to expand on that, what is digital entrepreneurship? So I believe that entrepreneurship is trying to solve tomorrow's problems. So with that said, I mean, tomorrow's problems are all going to be digital. As other speakers have mentioned. So yeah, I look forward to explaining the course structure and what has worked and what hasn't, and what engineers think about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and I think that's a good perspective. If we could just stay on this topic for a little while longer, and David, I'll put this over to you. As somebody who's created an entrepreneurship program and invented that program, you know that an engineer's perspective and an engineer's approach to entrepreneurship is how do we solve the problem? But all of those other aspects around cap tables and advisory boards and all of those other things around the actual business and around the business model for that entrepreneur to be successful in solving that problem and bringing something to market is something that maybe you could just touch on briefly, and then we'll move right into the architecture.
Sure. Okay, so there is criticism of computer science programs where they claim that they're using toy projects, and there's research done that shows that that's actually harmful to students. So what my guys have done at Chico State in the engineering department is teamed up with us in entrepreneurship. So we have a course where we have a lean entrepreneurship course, my digital entrepreneurship course, and then we have a software engineering course. So we pair these guys up in teams and we teach each of them the jargon of the other. So that's very, very important to do that. And then once they understand the language, so in the entrepreneurial world, it's all about lean startup and customer development and market fit and all that kind of stuff. Then for the engineers, it's all about agile development. So we're talking about Kanban and user stories and things like that. And we blend these two courses together and they work. And then we have the entrepreneurs learn how to work with customers to get information about what's important to go into the product. We put that into different charts and graphs. We share that with the engineers, and then they build it out in what's called a sprint, which is a 2-week hustle to get as much done as they can. And so we end up at the end of the semester with apps that are built for all kinds of variety of things. We've got a lot of successful ones, and we keep getting better at it. But that's the way to do it, is to team up engineers and entrepreneurs, have them understand the same language, the language that each of them uses, and then get them used to working on a team where engineers are responding to real customer demands.
Thanks for that, Dave. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Kaveh, I have a question that comes in that just came in that I think is related to kind of where we are now in our conversation. And if you could address this, and the question is, as the world becomes digital, what are the side effects of digital entrepreneurship, especially in developing countries? Are there any side effects?
So, of course, there are side effects for everything. Digital entrepreneurship is the same, but when you compare the cost and benefit of that, always the benefit is much more than the cost in this domain. Sometimes, you know, we have a digital tools without having a digital culture in place for that, and people, they misuse the technology or abuse the technology or underuse the technology because of just the lack of digital culture or digital literacy or information literacy. And it's not limited to the developing countries. Everywhere is the same. In any community, any society, you need to build up the culture of using a tool, including digital tools, before expecting that technology create a value that's supposed to be to offer to the community in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And if I could add a little bit more to that, what I found, because I've traveled the world, I lived in China for many years. You know, I've been all around in my days as being an entrepreneur and a business owner. And what I found is in a lot of developing countries, there's an opportunity to actually leapfrog some additional technologies. And it's often to jump to there. It's often more cost effective and a bigger benefit for society. For instance, I've been to some of the most rural parts of China. I took a drive from Xi'an to a place called Urumqi, and it was a 7-day drive. And I can't tell you how many times I would see a farmer in the middle of a field with an ox pulling the plow through the field, and he's on his flip phone. And that's just an example of how technology and digital entrepreneurship can help these developing countries to actually leapfrog some of the transitional technology at a lower cost and benefit everybody. I don't see any more questions coming in, so maybe this is a good time for us to talk about the architecture and how we're designing this in our universities. So David, maybe you can start with your architecture, and then we'll go to Kaveh and Shahab with yours, and maybe you could just take us through this. We have we're at 12:15, so we have plenty of time, and if you can kind of walk us through this and kind of describe the architecture that you're using in your case, and maybe put together some of the key elements of this architecture as they relate to the courses that you've put in place to actually make this work.
Okay, so this architecture here is focused on tools. If I was going to show you the architecture of the interaction between the students, that would be completely different. So let's understand first that this is what the tools that the students use. So we start off down here at the very bottom where we're talking about domain name management, web hosting service, and email management. And this is where you've got your website hosted. There's some file storage there, backups occur, there's a firewall, and a content delivery network. The next level up is analytics and content management. So content management systems are the most popular systems these days for building websites on the World Wide Web. And at that level, we're also dealing with search engine optimization and keyword tools. Now, one of the things that's interesting here is that there's a whole bunch of research that's been done about the strategy of building websites. And so I would caution instructors not just to have their students go out there and throw up a site and say, there we go, we have a business presence. There's a lot of research that's been done that shows how landing pages should be designed, how blogs should be constructed, right down to what the headlines should be, how you construct a good, exciting headline, all that kind of stuff. So there's a distinction in the world today between two camps, and one of them is the WordPress camp, and the other one is what's called closed system camp. Now, WordPress is a tool that's open to the world, and everybody is building what's called plugins for this, which are functionality pieces. So form builders and donate buttons and all those kinds of things. There's another side of the world, which is where closed tools live. And the problem with the closed tools, like the Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, etc., is that all of those tools have been built by companies who were leveraging the initial problem of WordPress, which is that it was so hard to use. And so they built these things. The problem is that those companies never took into consideration this very important search engine optimization. Okay, so they've done some marketing work to make claims that they have, but for example, Wix as a product has 2% of the market, WordPress has over 60%. So when you look at that, you understand that the real entrepreneurs are using WordPress. So my courses are designed to teach students the real tools. I mean, we teach real tools in accounting. We teach real tools in sales, HR. We teach real tools. So why not in entrepreneurship as well? Absolutely, we might as well. Now, the reason why we can do that these days is because they've become so much easier to use. 20 years ago, I was still in industry and companies were paying $150,000 or more to have a website built. That's just crazy, right? And it had to be done through all these esoteric coding mechanisms. These days, that's completely gone. All you do is drag and drop pieces together on the website and you're good. So it's all about as easy to build as a PowerPoint, quite simply. So I want to arm my students with the ability to know what they're getting into when they go out into the real world and what they're going to face. So this is what we work with in here. Now we get to this content management system, which I've got Page Builder listed here. And that's the important aspect here. It's a tool that allows you to drag and drop. So you put up a row on the screen, and then you pull over a picture gallery, and then you pull over a sign-up form, and it's just that easy. Now, on top of that, we start to get to the functionality where we begin to interact with customers. So we're going to do some email marketing. You can see up over here on the left-hand side, we've got all of our social media, right? Those are all very important. And then you're going to have a merchant gateway, like PayPal or Stripe right here next to email marketing. And then you're going to have these all important landing pages, and there's an incredible science behind this. Amazing. Now you start to get over here and you say, well, what else can we put up here for customers? It's courses, it's forums, it's memberships, etc. Blogs play a huge part. There's all this discussion out there about, oh, aren't blogs dead and all this kind of stuff? Well, no, they're not. This notion of personality differentiation is incredibly important. What it means is that one person listens to a speaker or a blog writer and they like them. They listen to another one and they don't like them. They don't resonate with them. So there's a space for everybody out there on the internet. And that's the exciting thing. Everybody can put up some pages and sell some products. So then at the very top level here, we have content strategy. And this is where you start to put the information on the website in specific kinds of arrangements that are most conducive so that people won't abandon the pages, okay? And we've collected up a tremendous amount of information about this research. And so all of the modules that we share with students, especially in the coming fall here, we've done a complete upgrade of the course. It's all about what have these research organizations found. So how do you increase conversions, et cetera, et cetera. And then of course up here we have the all-important customer who's going over to Google or Bing and they're executing some search. And this is critically important here because if you want to have a business that succeeds, you're going to have to rank on Google or Bing. And the way to do that is to use all the strategy approaches that we teach. So that's it basically. This is a digital entrepreneurship tools architecture, starting with customers, working with search engines who have these algorithms for ranking, and you just have to figure out how to work them. And then you got your content strategy, followed by your functional areas here, purchasing, email marketing, landing pages, dropping down to the content management system, which sits on top of web hosting. Now, one thing I'll tell you, the last thing I'll tell you that's interesting is I decided what is it that students don't need to know, and that is how to put together, how to pick web hosting, how to set up their first site, and all that kind of stuff. That's, you know, I want to get them right into building what they're building. So basically, I've set it up for them so that they can sign up for the course and they automatically have a starter website set up for them. And they can immediately move to this level and start working with content management. They don't have to mess around with any of this stuff down here. Of course, they have to get a domain name, but they just type it in, press a button, and it's automatically applied to their account. So now they can use their domain name. So, and then we focus all throughout here instead of dealing with any of these lower level issues here. Thank you.
Thanks, David. That sounds really interesting. A couple of questions. So, when you're teaching the students these tools, is that over the course of a semester? Is it like the Lavin entrepreneurship program at San Diego State, where it's over the course of a couple of years? How is that structured?
Well, we're now starting students out in the Intro to Entrepreneurship course and giving them exposure to this, and they're doing extremely well with it. We surveyed a couple of classes and asked students if they were interested before we put it in there, and the vast majority of them said, yeah, we're dying to learn that kind of stuff. So now they get it in the intro class, and then they can continue on and use it through all the rest of their classes. And indeed, other instructors, where they're talking about getting to the launch class, they're saying, wow, these guys, their products are much more sophisticated than they were before. And the reason is because they've got a really good web presence up, they're working with customers, people are signing up, and they're experiencing a real business situation.
Oh, that's great. I have a couple of questions here for you, and one of them is, what are your tips on how to help small business entrepreneurs to drive the shift from traditional offline small businesses to an online reality in developing countries? And I think where this comes from is there's a lot of people, at least at San Diego State, who come here and they go to school and they're part of a family-run business. And when they go home, they're going to take over that business and operate that business. And oftentimes they're offline businesses that need to go online. So how do you structure your teaching to address that? Or does this architecture and do these tools kind of already do that?
So in that case, if a family already has a business up and running and they're making money, I would recommend that they consider looking at a tool like Shopify. Shopify is a fantastic tool that's been developed, and it's for people who don't want to do any kind of development work whatsoever. They just want to have their store all set up. The problem is it's very expensive. So you can start out paying several $100s a year, and in the lean startup approach, that doesn't fit. We want students to spend $100 a year or less if they can. So Shopify is a great tool for that. And in fact, some of these other tools like Wix and Squarespace, they can be done by companies. If they're not going to be doing, if they're going to depend on word of mouth, you can use some of these lower level tools. But if you're going to have to be getting ranked by Google, they won't work. So if a company has a business, they're in another country, their family's already making money at it, and they need to make the transition, Shopify is a great way to go. There's very little learning curve on that, and they can just jump right in.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Amir, but Amir, I'm going to ask you to hold that question until we get through this part of the presentation, because I think we're going to bring that question into the fold here in the next set of questions across the team here. So Kaveh, we're going to move to you and your architecture and how you implement this across your classes.
Sure, thank you. They talk about the tools, and I'm going to talk about the process and structure of the classes that I'm teaching. So I use connectivism as a learning framework for my classes, and connectivism is a learning framework for a digital age. The main claim behind connectivism is knowledge is a commodity, is available everywhere, and learning how to learn is more important than knowing. And learning happens when we connect the dots in different concepts, different phenomena, different applications. And in the digital entrepreneurship, we need to connect the dots between digital knowledge, information, socio-cultural or socio-economical problems, as well as business problems. So I use that as a framework to build up my learning process in the class. I give the students openness to define that problem in their own immediate community, and in their, sometimes it's just a social problem, and I give them full autonomy to find a solution for that particular problem in an interdisciplinary team. I'm having it in one single class, but I have an information system student along with a business student. And this autonomy gives them some confidence to tackle the problem from the different directions. And then use the different digital tools to create some prototype, design some front end, back end, and then experiment in their own community for feasibility analysis. And then when they have their the final prototype ready, validate that in a social setting. We invite professionals, clients, community stakeholders all together, and the students present to them to validate their idea. And that gives them confidence and, of course, the knowledge to how to proceed with their idea. And the final product of the class is just a business proposal for investors, and they all have to submit to our on-campus incubator zip launch as part of the course requirement. There's no assessment, formal assessment, there's no quiz, no exam, no textbook. Everything is just having one open-ended real-world social problem, find a digital technology to solve that. And this happened through these 4 phases of social exploration to find a problem, digital ideation to use the digital tools like IoT, virtual reality, augmented reality, machine learning, and then do the business experimentation and refine their work and then present it to the community for validation.
And with 20 minutes left, just a quick aside here. The PowerPoint that you're seeing today will be made available. I'm not sure how, but we'll make sure that that gets out to people who are requesting it. And maybe Sky or Tammy, you can go in and key in an email address into Zoom meeting so that people can send an email requesting the PowerPoint and receive that from the group. So Kaveh, it sounded to me like some of the key elements of the courses that you're putting together are around the interdisciplinary aspects of the students. Can you talk maybe for just a couple of minutes on what you've seen in your experience between a class that has an interdisciplinary group of students versus a class that has maybe all business students?
Sure. In my class, I have information system students and other business students from marketing, entrepreneurship, management, and sometimes from other departments. What is interesting is when I put them in an interdisciplinary team and assign different roles to them. I have a business analyst, I have a system analyst, I have a front-end designer, back-end designer, implementation analyst. Each of these students take the role that they feel more comfortable and they see a future in that. And then based on that, they build their own identity in solving a problem. Each of them look at the problem from different perspective, and that's the result of their work always is above and beyond the student teams that they're all from one major. And that was my experience. So I always try to make sure in a team that I'm assigned, I have all the students from different backgrounds and different interests. However, all of them, they think the social problem that they're solving is the most pressing problem for the community.
Yeah.
So they have same motivation but different approach and background.
I understand. And Shahab, we're going to get to you in just a moment, but I know that David has some comments on this because we've talked about how you put engineers and business folks together. Maybe you can take a couple of minutes and talk about what you've seen doing it one way versus the other. And I think this is important because these are really key elements of some of the course design that you guys have put together.
You're asking me to talk about the elements of the course?
Well, so when we talked, you talked about how some elements of the course, you have students from engineering and they focus on agile development. You have students from business and they talk and they focus on kind of the lean startup methodology. And you had a really nice conversation with us a couple days ago as we were prepping, where you to put those two groups together. So I was wondering if maybe you could just talk a little bit about that, because I think it'd be beneficial.
Okay, sure. So as I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurs and engineers have different languages that they use. And entrepreneurs, it's all about lean startup, customer fit, market fit, customer development, et cetera. And then on the engineering side, it's all about agile development, which consists of sprints, which are short development periods, the Kanban, which is a place where they put the elements that are being worked on, user stories, which is one of the points of commonality between the two groups. So a user story for engineers describes how somebody would do something particular in a software, for example, and for the entrepreneurs, it's pretty much the same thing. It's what we might call a user requirement. So we have students in entrepreneurship interview a whole set of customers. They've got to do at least 30. And then they build, we have some tools that they use to fill out graphs and some charts. For example, the important satisfaction framework, where you can talk to people about how important is this particular feature and how satisfied are you with what's out there in the world today. And so when you find things that are very important, but very low satisfaction, those are the ones that you want to go after. So that's how we identify those. And in the engineering world, there's a tendency, if you don't, so I came from engineering. I did a computer science, artificial intelligence program at the University of California. And so I went to work in Palo Alto as a software developer for an AI company. So I have this background, and so I can talk about it, and I'm not dissing engineers. But one thing that's clear is that if engineers don't have market requirements, they'll dream up what they think should be in the product. Good for them, that's cool. So in order to make sure that it works really well and we get something out the door that's going to work for customers, you have to get the entrepreneurs to interview people and come up with ranked lists of things that can go into the Kanban. And those are the user stories, and the ones that are ranked very high, they get in there and they become the priority. So now we're working on the high priority items for customers. And then at the end of the first sprint, we go show that to them. And we talk about it, and we construct a new set of priorities. And then we go running off to the next sprint. Now, as far as the class goes, we've discovered a couple things. The first one is that you have to use dynamic equity. You've got to use an approach where students all agree that they're going to have some dynamic equity and not an overall percentage in the company to begin with, okay? They're going to earn based on, so all of them come up with an hourly rate for their work, and then they track their hours. And yes, of course, it's on the honor system. We've never had any problems, but if you're aware of the issues with fixed equity, those programs have a tendency to fail because people change their mind and they want to go off and do other things. And then a student is going, well, I was going to keep going on this product, but my partner doesn't want to do it anymore, and he owns 50% of the company. So dynamic equity solves that problem. So we put that in place first. That's a great icebreaker, by the way, too, for the engineers and entrepreneurs to get together. Then they do customer interviews, and then we develop user stories. So now engineers and entrepreneurs are in lockstep here. Then we put all this information into the Kanban, and we do some sprints. Now, we have to have some ownership. We have to have them take ownership and accountability. So we've developed two pieces for that. The first one is what we call show and tells. So we have show and tell for sprints 2, 4, and 6. And then at the very end, we have a tech showcase, which is a competition. And we have judges come in and actually look at their projects and judge them. This year, of course, it'll all be done online, but it's going to work with Zoom, of course. So dynamic equity, so teaching students the jargon, then setting up dynamic equity programs, slicing pie, then working on customer development and doing user story planning together, then having show and tells along the way, and then finally finishing with a tech showcase. And it ends up being a pretty good project for the semester.
It sounds like these are all key elements of the courses that really drive success for the students. And interestingly enough, a couple hours ago, I moderated an entire session on slicing pie with Mike Moyer.
I know.
So anybody here can go back and actually see that. I'm sure it was recorded. So Shahab, maybe you can talk a little bit about the architecture that you use within your classes, because you really take more of an engineering and Internet of Things approach to it.
Sure. Actually, to start with, let me just briefly talk about the target audience for such a course. Again, it's only for engineering students because there are actually a bunch of prerequisites to this course, network being one of the main ones, a computer network course. Because as you can see on these 5 vertical layers, we are analyzing basically the backbone of the Internet of Things, because what I'm trying to teach using this particular course is not have my students use tools, but instead develop tools that could possibly be used by other entrepreneurs, right? So the different names that for example, one of our, David, the first presentation mentioned are tools that basically are usually developed by engineers and computer scientists. So looking at that, we basically need to first make sure the students have a systematic approach to understanding the Internet of Things. Again, it would be impossible for a single course to embed all the prerequisites in knowledge into that particular aspect. Now, moving back a little bit, the way this course is designed is not an interdisciplinary approach where you bring in both business and the technical people into the picture, but instead a transdisciplinary approach where you bring in engineers and try to teach them the concepts from the other fields so that they can think like them, not simply use the jargons, for example. But given that, then basically I started with many different activities throughout the semesters. I've been teaching this course, and I started with market analysis. I did some market analysis in each and every one of these layers. But then what ended up happening is we found that most of the projects that focus on the market analysis at the device layer, which is the sensors and the actuators, meaning the control components, or the application layer, which is the user front end, are usually much more productive. And the cloud layer, network layer, and edge fog layer are usually agriopolis and the sort. So it's very tough to get into those markets or even have a novel idea because it's going to get eaten up by larger enterprises. Same with innovative thinking. As you can see, what ended up happening is the network and the cloud layer stay intact as is, and we just use the tools that exist for those layers, but instead we try to focus on developing tools on these other layers. Now, one of the most important things to consider when you're teaching entrepreneurship to non-business students is that problem solving is defined differently and is taught differently to other disciplines. I mean, to non-business disciplines. The way, usually, for example, engineers start problem solving is that they just start taking a first stab at it. They don't care about any sort of a background analysis or looking at other solutions. They just want to reinvent the wheel. They have that tendency to reinventing the wheel, which is not always a good thing, right? So you have to basically take a step back, but tell them to hold on to their ideas and innovative approaches, and instead first, for example, talk to the other customers or other competitors and learn about their solutions or requirements, and then try to create their own solution to that. Now, with that being said, yeah.
Shahab, with 7 minutes left, we have a question here that I think ties into what you're going to talk about next, and it's around risk management. And the question is, how do you manage the topics of risk and resilience to the students? And so how do you approach that?
Okay, that's actually a pretty interesting question, because as you can see, I intentionally left the risk management at the device layer, but then colored everything else other than the cloud as risk, and that cloud is a gray area because, I mean, it becomes an ethical issue whether risk would be part of benefiting the business or benefiting the public or not. So the thing about risk is, again, this particular approach I'm taking as being transdisciplinary, I try to avoid any sort of jargons or existing frameworks, but instead try to embed risk management thought process into problem solving skills, which is basically how would you, for example, so what happened this current semester is that we had a lot of plans. We had purchased a lot of equipment and we were building the project, right? But then COVID-19 happened and we no longer have access to any one of those equipment. And the groups can no longer work on those. But this was something that none of my students would ever plan for, because they were like, okay, we have the physical devices and there's nothing stopping us from that. So, and basically the risk management, I bring also some of the guest lectures and real world entrepreneurs to this to help with facilitating those kinds of activities so that we can embed those skills. But again, we try to stay away from teaching them the existing frameworks, but instead having them face the issues so they can come up with newer tools.
Thank you very much. So with 5 minutes left, you know, we have a couple more questions here, and I'm not going to. I don't think we'll be able to get to all the questions in the audience, but I wanted to make sure that we covered the content today, because this is really interesting. It's you know, what we've learned so far is with digital entrepreneurship, some of the motivating factors. We've heard from an engineering approach to course development. And an interdisciplinary approach to course development, which to me sounded like two very different approaches to two very different sets of ambitions. But in the next 3 to 5 years, David, maybe you can start. You know, where do you see entrepreneurship in the education system and in the courses going?
I would not be surprised at all to see entrepreneurship, some slice of it, become a general ed requirement. And I'm serious about this because the need for it is so high now. And with this recent global pandemic we've had, many people are moving to that right now, trying to set up a business. I know because I'm getting contacted by lots of people. And the solution is to teach it to people in college, for example, as just part of what they're getting ready to do in the world. Now, I believe that people are going to put together composite careers with micro niches. So they'll have a website up with a business and they're only dealing with 10 or 50 customers, but this is a way for them to safeguard themselves and their families so they have this other business going on, or they're developing it over time while they're working at a regular normal job. I see this as permeating society significantly, deeply. There's more. I have more on that, but I'll turn it over to my colleagues, give them a shot.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Kaveh, how do you see universities positioning themselves over the next 3 to 5 years to address this motivation towards entrepreneurship and innovative type of thinking?
Sure. I think we are moving from digitalization to digital transformation, you know, and all these digital tools in next 3, 4, 5 years become commodity. So everyone have access to that, knowledge to use that. And then it's the time to transform how we are using this technology and how we transform the common practices. Very simple example of that. We have entrepreneurship education platforms. We use digital technology to bring mentors to these platforms to provide support to the students, learners. By transforming this use, we can design smart mentors, mentor bots that I'm actually working on that to provide mentorship, AI-enabled mentorship to all learners. So that's a transformation of the use of digital tools to just enable or facilitate the process, to enable them to take over the entire process. And the role of university here is very simple. They need to trust the students, provide all the freedoms to learn what they want to learn, how they want to learn, from whom they want to learn. And of course, they limit their judgment. They don't judge them. All this assessment that we have, traditional assessment that we have, that are killing students' creativity. By imposing a structure on the courses, we are killing their creativity. Very simple example of that, teaching cases to the business student graduate level is a fantastic tool. But by using cases as a main component of the undergraduate entrepreneurship classes, we are just limiting imagination of our students to what happened in the past, rather than preparing them for problems that they're gonna face in the future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Shahab, with 1 minute left in this session, from an engineering perspective and the Internet of Things, do you see more innovation, or do you see consolidation around groups of innovation going forward?
So let me answer the two parts of your question separately. So first,
okay.
We used to have divergence in the Internet of Things technologies because so many different industries, from health to manufacturing to even smart home, smart city type of applications or transportation, we're trying to take a stab at creating some sort of a sensor-based solution. But what we are seeing nowadays is all of them are sort of converging into some sort of standardization, because that's how technologies survive, right? You have had that with the internet and all sorts of protocols
Sure.
to being.
That was great. And David, great job. Thank you. It sounds like you're taking a very pragmatic approach to entrepreneurship. And Kaveh, the creativity you've designed in your classes, in your programs, sounds absolutely fantastic. And Shahab, the focus around the different engineering stacks toward the Internet of Things and bringing creative problem solving in from an engineering perspective is very interesting. I want to thank the three of you for making this happen and providing such guidance and insight. I'd like to thank all of the attendees who attended. If you look in the chat window, you can see how to get a copy of this presentation, although it will be posted at a later time. Enjoy the rest of the conference.